Okay, this is going to sound very weird, but there is a fly inside a computer right now. And no, I don't mean it as some deep metaphor. I mean it literally. Somewhere in a server, there's a digital fruit fly walking around, looking for food, reacting to things around it. Basically, just living like a normal fly. And the weird part is, nobody directly told it what to do. That's the thing that's been stuck in my head for days now. Because when most people think about artificial life, they imagine somebody writing code like walk forward, turn left, find food. But this wasn't like that. Scientists spent years scanning the brain of a fruit fly. Every tiny connection, every little signal pathway. They basically mapped the whole thing out. Then they placed the brain structure inside a digital body, and the fly just woke up inside a digital simulation. It started moving around, on its own like a living creature, started reacting to things, started acting basically like a fly. And honestly, the more I think about it, the stranger it gets. Because from the fly's point of view, its world is real. It reacts to danger, it searches for food, it responds to the environment around it. But none of it is actually real. The food isn't real, the body isn't real, the world around it isn't real. It's all signals being fed into a system. And then you realize something kind of uncomfortable. And that's basically what modern neuroscience says happens to us too. Because your brain has never actually touched reality directly. Everything you see right now is your brain interpreting signals. The light hits your eyes, signals travel through your nervous system. Your brain builds a picture of reality inside your head. In other words, your consciousness is already experiencing a kind of biological simulation. Even sound works like that. Smell, touch, emotion. Your brain is constantly translating signals into an experience. So then the question becomes, if the fly can't tell it's inside a simulation, how do we know we aren't? How do we know we're not also in the simulation? And I know that sounds like, one of these internet conspiracy questions people throw around. But honestly, this experiment made the idea feel way less abstract to me. Because before this, simulation theory and, artificial consciousness mostly felt like science fiction. You see it in movies, people talk about it in podcasts, late night conversation with your buddies. But now, there's something inside a digital world behaving like conscious artificial life. And it doesn't know the difference. That's the part I can't stop thinking about. The fly doesn't know. It probably fully believes that world is just reality. Honestly, I think that idea bothers people more than they realize. Because, not because of technology, but because it forces you to ask a really weird question. What if consciousness and artificial intelligence are not as different as we think? What if the mind doesn't really care what it lives inside? A biological brain, a machine, artificial intelligence, code, signals. maybe once the pattern is there, experience starts happening. And if that's true, things start getting weird really fast. Because humans love believing we're special. You know, we always assume we're the final version of everything. But history keeps, embarrassing us. And at one point we thought the Earth was the center of the universe. Then we found out it wasn't. We thought humans were completely separate from animals. Then we found out we weren't. And now we might be discovering that consciousness itself is not as mysterious or unique as we thought. And, maybe it can exist in places we never expected. And honestly, I don't fully know what to do with that idea yet. But I can feel something about these experiments across the line. Because the question is no longer, can we simulate life? Now, the question to me is, if artificial life inside a simulation feels conscious, then what's the actual difference? And maybe the strangest part of all this is that the fly would probably say there's no difference at all, assuming it's even aware enough to ask the question in the first place. Which honestly feels very human too, because humans do the exact same thing. We wake up inside a reality we didn't create, surrounded by systems we barely understand, trying to figure out what all this is, while completely assuming this world must be a real one. And, maybe it is. But the fly probably thinks that too. And I honestly can't stop thinking about this. Because if the fly can't tell the difference between the simulation and reality, then the next question gets a lot more uncomfortable. So if you want part 2 of this, just let me know.